Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to episode 10 of the InkPod podcast. We have here a SAATI representative, aka the Emulsion Wizard, Keith Perkins, who's the technical sales manager of the chem division for SAATI America. We're very excited to have him on here. We've probably thrown your name out, I would say, at least 4 or 5 times. So in spirit, you've been with us on multiple episodes,
good, right?
Keith.
Nothing bad.
Always good.
And now our audience gets to see what you look like. So thank you very much for joining. And we'd love for you to kind of chat about, your experience in the industry. I know you're a spring chicken in the space. So, let us know how you got in and your journey in this crazy world of screen printing and what you're up to nowadays.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the invite to come and chat and hang out for a little while. I got out of a tech school in the mid-'80s and had the opportunity to go to work for a very large printer in the Dayton, Ohio area that printed T-shirts for Harley Davidson. I thought it was kind of cool, so that's kind of where I started. And our screen room was a mess, and the smartest decision and comment I ever made to my boss was, whoever makes this stuff, and I didn't know what emulsion was, but whoever makes this, bring him in for a couple of days. And the gentleman I met was named Al Petsy. Well-renowned in the world of screen printing in here in the U.S. And he come in and taught me the basics of emulsion and exposure and EOM and moisture and humidity, the groundwork. And from there, I kind of took it to a new level. So I did spend 12 years in production.
Wow.
And now I've spent, since 97. So I've been out of production in the consulting and sales since 1997, and here I am.
Like I said, spring chicken, 27 years in the...
When I grow up, I'm going to let you guys know what I really want to do.
So what's your day-to-day look like, Keith? What do you do?
I work with a lot of dealers across North America. I do work with some direct accounts as well, but I like to go in and do assessments to kind of be nosy and see how they operate and look at the flow and efficiency of the screen rooms. And I've kind of gained a niche of how to pick them apart and how to praise them at the same time. By taking notes, 3 to 5 hours and just watching everyone, I generally can get a feel of how I can improve the flow and be more efficient and reduce some costs on labor. And that's kind of what I do nationwide here in the U.S. And it's really cool. I'm pretty passionate about it. It's all I've ever done. So most of it comes natural. I don't know everything about it, but I've got some very cool people in the corner at SAATI that I can turn to at any given point and get information needed.
Nice. Are you involved in the R&D side of things as well?
Yeah.
I do get the opportunity to test the new products in the field before they're released. And I just so happened to got a shipment yesterday of a couple of new products for SAATI. And I'll be out hitting the streets with those next week, trying to pick them apart, so to speak. I know they'll work, but for me, I'm more interested on where something doesn't work. When I set up a shop and go through all the changes and training and writing SOPs and getting deeply involved in an account, and when I leave, I don't check in and say, hey, how's it going? I check in and say, hey, man, since I've left, what is not working? Because once you fix something with certain accounts, it becomes the norm and they get used to it. But you ask them what their problems are and they'll talk all day long. So it's pretty common amongst most friends.
Have you seen, like, I know we were talking about SAATI and everything, but have you seen anything different? Because I know SAATI acquired Chromaline in the last few years. Has anything changed? Is there more R&D development, things like that that's added on your plate? Do you have more clients now that you go and reach out to? How's that been?
Well, at this time, and I have to share, the acquisition of Chromaline was an amazing thing for SAATI. We've partnered. They still are running as 2 separate businesses, although they did move the production of the emulsion from Duluth down to South Carolina. But they're still running both locations. Of course, we also have a large warehouse on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But it's working out very well, and I look forward to the changes and whatever comes, in the future.
Are all your chemistry and emulsions made in that one plant?
The I believe there are a few still being made up in Duluth. I'm not certain of what exactly still exists up there. I know they were a large film manufacturer for Chromoline and the SAATI films. That is all still there, and I think they still make a few emulsions up there. I'm not involved on the production side of the chem line, but the majority of it, I'll say 80 to 90% of it, is still made down in the South Carolina area.
Cool. And like
Got it.
going back
And I
to
don't.
R&D, right? For smaller shops that don't have the autocoders and things like that, what are a few small tricks maybe for them that they become more efficient, right? That could save time, or like, what do you see down in their shops?
Now for the small accounts, you got to give them attention, because those small accounts become mid-sized accounts, which become
Yeah.
big accounts. And some of the largest accounts I've worked with in the U.S. all started out of their garage 10, 15, 20 years ago. So everybody requires the same amount of information and training and attention. With smaller accounts, coding screens and trying to dial in exposures is probably the most important area. Pre-press determines how well things go up and down out in the production area. So what I try to stress to some owners is, if you've got a good pre-press person, take care of them, because we want that same person checking the tension of the screens and coding the screens mostly. And as you know, some of those small accounts, whoever's free that day gets to code screens. And that's the worst possible decision you can make, because we all in a manual application have more pressure or faster or slower. We'll do one side, turn it the other side, and flip it and turn it. And I call it dancing with the screen, but it's unnecessary. So when I run into this situation, I tell the owners, listen, I don't care who it is, but pick one person and have them coat the screens. And if you know they're going to miss a couple days, then prepare for that prior to, and have them code up enough screens until they get back. But
Smart.
obviously, vacation time rolls around, they're going to feel the pain.
Or buy an autocoder, and
Oh, yes.
for what you guys are putting, a SAATI laser, which is, I think that's how you guys know each other, Shawn. When you bought your SAATI laser, did Keith get involved?
Yep, 100%. You got us dialed in.
Shawn is a big advocate for SAATI up there in the north.
Yeah.
And it was great meeting him. And I look forward to going up into his area of Canada and doing a class here soon, like we did last month.
I'm excited.
Well, we're looking at trying to do one in the Montreal area at some point in the summer.
Cool.
Shawn, he's not rocking blue presses, so he automatically gets disqualified, unfortunately. He made the purchase before I got to know him, so
Hey,
not that they're not good presses.
Send me some blue presses, and I don't mind. We'll do it here.
There you go. Shout out M&R. Let's get some presses over to Printies over there. So, and I know Keith. When did we first meet? I think it was when we decided to bring on SAATI, and then we did our initial consultation, and you were pulled in basically to help look at my product line and see things I needed to improve on, or challenges or products that I was missing. And you've been super helpful. I've learned a ton from you, which has been awesome, that I've been able to transfer over to my clients. Sometimes I was taught some crazy misinformation. It's like when I started, I'm like, what's the difference between these 4 emulsions? And like, pretty much it all does the same thing. They're just different colors. It's whatever color the customer likes. I'm like, oh, okay. Kind of seems silly to me, but
Right. With
I
this
remember
new
I told you
generation
that.
with this new generation coming in of printers, they go to the web for most of their information. And I can share that from what I read and see on some of the forums, I think it's a split of about 50-50 of really good information versus not so good information. I don't want to say bad and really throw somebody out there, but there's equal amounts of good and bad information out there.
Yep.
And one of the things I enjoy about what I get to do is developing a line of products in each account that correlate well with one another. They're solvent resistant or the water resistant, then picking the right emulsion. And it all really starts with the exposure unit and what inks you're running and mesh counts. And you got to make sure they all play well together. So if you're running, let's just use an example real quick. If you're running a water resistant emulsion and somebody says, we're going to throw got to print these trinkets with a epoxy for enamel ink, that emulsion is going to fall out while they're running it. So, you got to know what inks are running, what exposure unit they have, the tension levels. There's some information you have to gather to correlate and really in your head, let it start spinning as to what emulsion and products and chemicals you're going to use and press wash, because they're all necessary to the evil. You don't want to do too much troubleshooting or have too much failure if you've got a little better guidance.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think
Totally.
like for us as a smaller shop, when we first started and we were doing a lot of manual printing, it wasn't that big of a deal in the sense that we didn't get the breakdowns, we didn't get the misalignments, because you can always play with a manual press, right? Oh, I'm going to twist my screen a bit to the left and just squeegee it. Oh, this one I'm going to push, this one I'm going to pull. But then when you get to an auto, this is where you see you're really like you're lacking in the darkroom, because on press, okay, my base is that like it's my emulsion's thicker on the left than it is on the right because my guy was sick yesterday, so somebody else coated the screen, so there's more emulsion on the left. Now I'm trying to do a second color top coat on it, and it doesn't come out the same. It's pink on the left because there's more white than it is on the right, so I'm laying down more red on the right than I am on the left, and then you're not getting your same result because you're trying to be efficient, right? And this is where you see how big the darkroom is and how it can change your efficiency. But like for us, we talked about this in the last podcast. What are some of the top tools you think any shop must have to be efficient in their darkroom and in their shop as well?
Yeah, I go back to some bare basics when I talk about this, and anyone that stretches their own screens will understand the importance of a tension meter. But for all those small guys that are buying screens, the cheapest screen they can get from the 5 different dealers that are around them, what they don't consider or check is the tension level once it lands in their building. So anybody, and I preach this all the time, even if you buy pre-stretched screens from someone else, you need to have a tension meter to check them on the dock, because if they're below your quality or standards, you need to send them back. So tension meter would be the first one.
Amen.
Then moving into the screen room, there are multiple other ones, but if the screen doesn't have the proper tension, I wouldn't even coat it. Don't even go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. When I first I took a class at Vaztex, actually, when I just started getting into screen printing here as a dealer, and I wanted to learn, and I went out there, and a gentleman by the name of Douglas Gregar. I don't know. Do you know him, Keith?
I don't believe so.
No. Oh, he does a lot of the Vaztex classes. Always wearing a cowboy hat. He's at all the shows.
Oh, yes, I do know who that is.
Yeah.
See, the cowboy, the screen printing cowboy. So basically, he said, like, when I do consulting, the first thing I do before I fly out there is ask them if they have a tension meter, and if they don't, I ask them to buy one and hit the tensions on all the screens. And if the screens are shot, I tell them to get new ones before I get there. Make sure they hit that tension, because if not, I'm wasting my time going up there. And I think the industry in general, the majority, they really underestimate the value and importance of creating a good screen. So you'll see guys that they'll spend $200,000 on a press or multiple presses, and then their screen room is a joke. The guy coating the screen, he has it leaned against his shoe, and he's trying to coat it up, and they just have so many problems on press, and they're not efficient. And for me, I've always felt it being backwards. If I were to prioritize, I'd say yes. First, you get the auto. You get a good dryer. After that, your next investment, it's not a second auto. It's investing in your screen room, right?
100%. And my good friend Greg Kitson, who used to own Mind's Eye Graphics in Decatur, Indiana, he's since retired, but one of the best statements that he ever made at the mini pro screen workshop that he and I did together was that we need to be a better screen making pre-press people than we are printers in the beginning. Because if you can fine tune and have consistency coming out of the screen room, it will make a mediocre printer good. It'll make a bad printer mediocre, and it'll make that mid-range guy an excellent printer. So not to say picking them apart, but the better tension and EOM and proper exposure, it all kind of correlates and rolls right out to the press, and you have less problems.
100%. Yeah, and like not even just in like the we were talking about the tension meter, but like as well as having the, how does it, 21 step calculator?
Oh, 100%.
Like that's massive. Like for us, right, when we got the LTS, we used the SAATI PHUHR, and we weren't running the Diazo before. And when we got the LTS with the level exposure, we had solid 6, but we were getting breakdowns on press. So we're like, all right, let's try Diazo 11. We tried Diazo 11, bumped up our laser power, and we're never getting any breakdown at all, even though we were getting a solid 6. But now our solid 6 is so much clearer. Like it's not fading at all. It's really solid. So having that dialed in to be able to hit that was massive for us to be able to run those 1500 church jobs without having breakdown with HSA or discharge inks, right? And that's being able to test it out and having that tool. But that tool, like, how much does that cost?
$35 Canadian.
There you go.
I mean, SAATI makes it. SAATI makes it for pennies. I don't buy it for pennies.
But like if you go to any trade show, any course, they're going to give it out for free, right? It's like it's the best tool that we use every single day in our dark room, every morning. And the reason why we test it out is maybe our EOM was messed up. It's not the same today. So maybe our guy we have an automatic coder, but we still use it every single day on the first screens. It's that's what, like, it's normal. Like that's what we do. So I think that's a big tool that everybody should have as well.
Yeah, well, and Keith actually, he was at the advanced screen print training course at Avid. SAATI is one of the sponsors, and he literally had a fistful of exposure calculators and gave one to every single shop that attended, because it's like, it's probably the cheapest investment that you'll make into your business that will have the greatest impact. Your ROI on a 21-step exposure calculator is like...
It's instant. It's instant.
Yeah. Let me share.
You made your money as it's being shipped to you. You've already paid that thing off.
Yeah. The biggest statement that I get when I walk into a shop and I'm assessing and looking around, I walk in the screen room because I'm nosy. You know, I'm a screen room guy. And I'm walking in, I'm watching the girl shoot a 110. Then I watch her shoot a 160 and a 230, and she made no adjustments to the exposure. And I'm like, hey, what's your exposure for the 110? Oh, 14 seconds. Okay, cool. What's the exposure for the 160? 14 seconds. What about the 230 to 305? 14 seconds. I'm like,
it gets crazier, Keith. Because
does.
You ask him, where did you get 14 seconds? Oh, the guy that I learned from, he said 14 seconds, and he got the 14 seconds from my supplier. That's what they said. But it's like, and we've talked about this. How does your supplier know what exposure unit, the humidity in your environment, the seasonality changes that are affected? If you have a fluorescent, how strong are those bulbs in that specific unit as opposed to the other one that they got the 14 seconds from? You're just taking a shot in the dark. You know what I mean? You have no idea. It's like saying, how long is it going to take you to swim 100 meters in the ocean? Well, is it completely calm, or are there massive waves, or is there a lot of wind against me, or is there a shark on my tail? Like, there's so many variables here, and you've never even swam the 100 meters to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's so many variables, and I get I get a lot of tech calls, and they're like, "Hey, we just got the sample of your emulsion. What's the exposure?" What do you mean? Before I can talk to you about exposure, I need to know the mesh counts, the EOM of the emulsion. And, there's light source, which is probably the number one, but because the mesh counts have a different percentage of open image area and the gravity falls with the different coating techniques, that's why technically every mesh count has a different exposure. Yeah. But a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that because they feel it's going to slow them down. But the pinholes, the breakdowns on the press and everything, they don't consider how much that's slowing them down. So if we went back to the basics, it'd be that tension meter and then establishing the proper EOM. Now, there's a different EOM for water-based versus plastisol. But once you establish those, then you can nail the exposures. And if you're using that 21-step guide, we highly recommend you guys use the Direct Prep 2 or the Concentrated Direct Prep 3, because that's going to give you a definitive, clear-cut step 6, step 7, 8. As where if you don't use a good degreaser like the mesh prep, you'll notice that those steps will kind of come off in half, like a chunky, or it'll flap over. So the tension, the emulsion thickness, the exposure, those are the first three most critical things to sending that good screen out there.
And do you want to tell just how people can measure their EOM just so they can understand it? Like,
Yeah,
it's fairly simple, but
we sell two different stencil thickness gauges,
Yep.
and they're measuring the emulsion over mesh. That's what a lot of people don't understand. They hear EOM all the time, but they don't know what the hell it means.
Yeah.
So it's emulsion over mesh. Mesh has one thickness, and then you add emulsion to it, and it becomes a different thickness. So stencil thickness gauge will measure the thickness of the fabric, and then we can measure the thickness of the emulsion with the fabric, and then run the math and difference and get a percentage. Plastisol guys are generally running 18 to 20%. High density specialty inks, you might get a 25-30% EOM. But then if you go back to water based, those guys are going to probably run 10 to 12%, maybe 14. So it's helpful when you drag that tool out to know what mesh count it is and what they're actually going to be printing.
Yeah, and then you covered some other. There was the Aqua Check. I remember that was one that we didn't even have. That I think that was the only tool that we weren't selling. And Shawn, you have an Aqua Check?
no, that's the only one we
Boom.
don't have.
Keith,
to
get me
measure
a
the
sale,
humidity.
buddy. Get me a sale.
Would you like to see a picture of mine?
Sure. Where is it?
So that's one of the cool things when I get to come out and do a class with you guys or go see a shop. I don't even know I'm doing it, but I walk through the plant carrying this hard case Inspector Gadget kit, and everybody's looking at me like, is that dude carrying a bomb? What the hell's he got in that thing? But when we crack it open and they see the 12 to 13 different QC gauges and tools we have in there, they're all necessary, but not always used every day.
Yeah.
The Aqua Check that you're mentioning, it's a moisture meter, and you can use many different moisture meters, but this one has a gauge on it as where it's red, orange, and green. And if you measure the emulsion with the two probes and it's red, the red basically is like a stop sign. Don't expose that screen because there could be consequences. Then there's an orange level. It's kind of like yellow on a stoplight. That's it's caution. You may or may not have. But if it's dry and you place that moisture meter on the screen, it's going to give you a green indicator, and it's telling you that it's dry. So those are necessary if people are really rushing screens and doing things out of sync. I just worked this week out west with a company that I got them to the point where they're only doing 40, 50 screens a day, but we reclaimed 50 and we let them set overnight. We coded the 50 they reclaimed yesterday, and then they were exposing today the screens that they coded yesterday. So because of that setup, we didn't have to worry about moisture.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's got 24 hours to dry. If you're set up that way, that's probably ideal. The best you can possibly be without a moisture gauge.
Yep.
And you also always have to be conscious of the temperature and humidity inside your screen room. And to help that, you don't introduce wet screens or rinse screens out inside the screen room. You can, but there's always a few consequences to that. That moisture and anything that we can't visually see generally are the enemy of screen making, like dirt and dust, moisture. They're not friendly.
So Zach, I'm gonna have to get one of these because we're actually adding a humidifier right next to the darkroom.
I'm going
next
to send
week.
an email right now because I just ordered 6 of them. And I will, Zack, there we go. Send.
We're adding humidifiers because we got more digital printers. And winter, it's a pain with all the heaters in the shop, and it's cold right now. It's minus 13 outside. So today the humidity was like at 32. It's just not good for digital printers. So I'm gonna have to test that out and see if I need to add another dehumidifier or whatnot in the darkroom to test it out. But yeah.
John, you're going to add humidifiers to the press outside the screen room?
Yes.
Well, that's okay, but you want to run a dehumidifier in the screen room.
So we have one right now. It's running perfectly fine, but I'm wondering because it's going to shoot a lot of humidity about 20 feet away from the darkroom, so it's going to be pretty close by. It's still enclosed and all that, but I just want to make sure. So we're probably going to maybe add another dehumidifier.
I'll throw
in the
some numbers at you, and this was true up until some of the inkjet printers and wax jets that need and like humidity in the screen room. But we've always had a target of 76 degrees and 40% or less humidity in screen rooms.
Yeah.
And, out west, it's even drier.
Yeah.
But the inkjet and some of the wax jets, they need a little bit of moisture.
Yep.
Traditional screen making didn't like it. The LTS doesn't care.
No, it's good.
But it's still nice to not have that moisture in the room. But
We're running currently at around 24% humidity in the darkroom.
that's fine.
Yeah, our screens are beautiful right now.
That's actually really nice.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. We got that thing dialed in. It's nice.
Sweet.
All right.
So for our listeners, as you guys know, we try and do everything off the top, nothing scripted, but we really want to make this a very educational piece, an educational episode. We're not here to talk about company culture. We're not here to talk about trends. We're here to talk about how to become better in your screen making. And we pitched the idea to Keith to basically say, I said 10, Keith came up with 12 of the most common challenges that he sees in the field in screen rooms, and basically how to fix them. So we got a list of 12. I don't know what the answers are. I know some of the answers personally. So Keith, I want to kind of go through some of the lists. We talk about, how you're seeing them in the field, how you guys are fixing them, how to avoid them. And hopefully, if everyone listening could pick up 2 or 3, golden nuggets of information, you could resolve a lot of their challenges. The first one I want to talk about was pinholes. And believe it or not, I actually had a very good client of mine today. I've been working with them for about 6 years, screen printing for about 30 years. And they're like, Zack, we're just dying with pinholes. And I said, okay, well, what emulsion are you using? And they're using the SAATI, what is it, the PS2? Which one
blue?
is the graphic? Yeah, PS2 blue. And basically, I just regurgitated what you told me and said, yes, it's a graphics emulsion. Does it work? Sure. Is it the right one? No. You're not creating a thick enough stencil, which is most likely causing the pinholes, or you might have some dirt or dust floating around, landing on your screen. So pinholes. Take it away, Keith.
So pinholes can be caused by a couple of different things. Improper rinsing after the reclaim would probably be number one. Number 2 would be fans blowing on the screens after you've reclaimed them, because they're blowing dirt and dust on the mesh that you can't visually see. So we reclaim them, we don't rinse them well, we put fans on them to dry, and then we go coat right over the dirt and dust. So one of the things I like to do is go pick up their screens and hold them up and look through them. It happened out West Coast this week. The screens were it looked like the outer space. It's speckled everywhere with dirt and dust, pinhole. So it was a combination of things. I got them to use in a mesh prep and low pressure rinse, and I took all their fans away from them, and I didn't coat the screens until the next day. And then we coated the screens, and within 30 minutes, you could hold them up, and they were a perfect sheet, a nice clean coating strike of emulsion with no dirt or dust. So was it the reclaim? Is it the emulsion too thin? Is it fans drying the emulsion? It could be a combination of things. But most of it is coming from the reclaim and fans, and then underexposure would be another key to pinholes. Now, in tandem to that, I know it's another topic, but fish eyes land in the same explanation. Fish eyes generally are chemistry left from the reclaim that have dripped on the screen, or something's dripped off your glove on the screen, and it makes a white spot. So you sometimes can see it, but if you dry that screen and then coat it tomorrow, and as the emulsion dries, and if there's a spot of chemistry, which is residue, you coat over it. As it dries, that chemical will push the emulsion away from that chemical, causing a ring with a light spot in the center.
Yeah.
That's what we call fish eyes. And if you rinse them better, maybe use a mesh prep and try to wash out the booth and change your gloves, you'll have a lot less of that. So pinholes and fish eyes can both ultimately be caused by that final step in reclaim.
Mm-hmm. That's massive.
So I don't know, this is on your list. I was just going through it, but and I don't know if this is, I hear the term moire happening a lot, and that's not on here. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You are.
Yeah. So that's when you're using, to my understanding, like two identical mesh counts. Is that correct? On the underbase and the
Well,
top.
this almost gets into a conversation, advanced conversation, but there is a
This
art
is
to
an
screen
advanced
moray.
podcast, Keith. Don't be
Yeah,
shy. We are
there's
advanced.
there's art to screen moray. There's a screen or the film to screen moray, and then there's also a screen to substrate moray. So moray is the general terminology, but there are many types. The one most commonly talked about for us is you shoot the screen and you've got a nice 55 or 65 line halftone, and it looks like a checkered pattern as it morays. And that's honestly, it's caused by mesh interference. That's where the dots that you've chosen, the LPI or DPI, don't match with the mesh count you chose.
Too high.
Now, for people that don't understand that, and what I did back in the day of not understanding that, I would go in there from the 196 that I shot that morayed. I'd shoot it a couple times, still moray. I would just go up in mesh counts to my 230, reshoot it, and boom, it looks beautiful. That's what I'd sent to production. As I learned later on that there's a mathematical equation of like 3.9 or 4.1 times your DPI gives you a recommended mesh count. So, as an example, if a guy's running 55 line, just for easy math here, times 4.1 would be an easy 225 recommended mesh count. So what's the closest thing to it? A 230.
230.
These are things I didn't know back in the day, and there's a lot of trial by fire, learning as I go. But as I stayed in the industry and kept at this, people I met in my career explained to me why that happened. I learned how to fix it. I just didn't know what the hell caused it. So and if you've got low tension, let's say you do have the 230, but it's at 16 newtons instead of 24. That certainly could cause a moray as well because the mesh didn't open up properly to get the proper flow and open image area. The dots are going to fall on the thread. You'll be able to see them, but they will never rinse out.
Yep.
Thread interference.
Got it. So the next one was mesh prep and degreasing, which you kind of touched on. So look, I know customers that don't degrease at all. I have some customers like, oh, I use a screen wash and it's got degreaser in there and it's fine. So what challenges will you run into if you don't have good practices when it comes to your mesh prep and degreasing? And
it really
how do you
comes
fix
down
that?
it comes down to adhesion. And I like to pick on my competitors when it says stain remover and degreaser. I put it in the bottle, I shake it up. If it foams up and you see a lot of surfactant, then it might be legit. Ours is the same way. Not all ink removers have a surfactant built in to where they could be called both. Matter of fact, most of the ink removers out there are solvent based. So how do you put a surfactant in a solvent and call it degreaser? It's difficult. Does it work? Certainly does. And it works mainly in some of those athletic printers that don't necessarily need the increased adhesion level on the mesh. They just coat over it and rock and roll. The way I like to explain this to somebody that doesn't necessarily want the technical version is a good mesh prep, and ours is direct prep 2. A good mesh prep acts like primer on the mesh, just like painting a car or in a new house. They always primer the wall or primer the car. Why? Get the paint to stick better. So a good explanation is water based and discharge. We recommend it's for me, it's almost a mandatory step to prep the mesh, primer the mesh. Why? Because I want the emulsion not to marry and dry like this. I want it to dry like this and be durable and allow you to run 2,000, 12,000, or 22,000 impressions. And if you make the screen correctly with a good mesh prep, the right EOM, the proper exposure, when I make a screen and send it, I don't care what you do to it. That's how confident, maybe some will say I'm a little cocky, but that's how confident you can be once you set this stuff up right.
Yeah. And this doesn't just apply to screens. I had a kitchen that I was having redone at a rental property, and the guy came in and took all the cabinets off, and he went and painted them. And then when I saw him come and do the trims at my place, he literally just had the gun and he was spraying over. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. Isn't there like oils on that? Don't you have to, degrease it and then prime it? He's like, no, it's fine. This paint is good. I said, oh, okay, news to me. And then he puts up the kitchen doors and literally, and it was in the wintertime, and I think he was spraying them in his garage. And within like a month, the peel is just like, the paint is just peeling off. And I had to go get them sandblasted and get them done properly. But it's not just screen printing that's important to degrease and prime.
There you go. It delaminated. That's what we call the emulsion, when it won't stick and it just peels off. It's delaminating. Why? Because you didn't have the proper adhesion to start with.
Okay, and not just that, but like for us, it was easier for us to develop our screens when we mesh prepped them, because I think the emulsion was maybe just bonded better. So when we wanted to get really high details, sometimes we don't expose to a solid 6. We might go a bit lower because we want higher definition. I'm not going to say that, but anyways.
Shame on you.
You already did, dude.
But the mesh prep
Keith's
helped
logging
us.
off.
Mesh prep helped us be able to hit those, right? Those lower halftones that we wanted to hit, so we were exposing a bit lower and things like that. With the mesh prep, we were able to hit it and still maintain our higher halftones with our lower halftones. Because if we didn't have the mesh prep on our higher halftones, we would lose those. So
Yeah,
is it the diazo or the mesh prep that helped us achieve that?
A little of both. I can tell you that and I know this is a textile segment, but the graphics guys that have run the lowest line count they've run is 65 on a 305, 355 mesh. But they run up to 420, 460 mesh.
Wow.
And almost all of those guys will run a good mesh prep. Why? Because they're trying to hold a 2% dot. And keep in mind, they're printing on paper or mylar or glass or something, but they're going to purposely underexpose that emulsion. So what's going to happen to it on press? It's going to break down quicker, but they're purposely underexposing to hold that finer dot. Now, using a good mesh prep, it will allow that dot to stick and stay on the mesh and not fall off. It won't delaminate because of the underexposure. So a good mesh prep, and I never say this, but will allow you to underexpose like what you're doing, that you put out there for the public to hear.
We don't do it very often. We just, it's when I want to get really picky. And I'm the only one that's allowed to do that. I just go and geek out in the dark room on my own and nobody sees it. It's just me. And I'm like, all right.
John, that's a nail in the coffin, brother.
I know.
Nice.
I'm not saying this.
So next, fans on clean screen. Oh, sorry. You had something to say, Shawn? Cut you off there, buddy.
No, that's it. I just wanted to say, that's it. I'm not doing it. It's not true.
Fans on clean screen. So you kind of talked about that. Is that what causing the pinholes? Is that the main thing?
Well, the fans, and I tell everybody, you use a fan, right? Yeah, they're on the clean screens, right? Let's go and look on the back side of the fan at all the crap that's stuck to it. It's dirt and dust. So they just spent all this time cleaning screens, and they're going to set them in a rack in front of a dirty fan that's on the floor, picking up all the crap from our feet that we walk by. And keep in mind, I say this a lot, but the things that you can't see visually are dominant in the screen making process. As that dirt and dust gets on the mesh, we coat over it, then we shoot it, we send it to the press. The squeegee drags on the emulsion a little bit, and the dirt falls out, and then boom. They're complaining to the screen maker, Shawn, you got pinholes. Well, you didn't have any when I sent it to you. That's because the squeegee ground down a little bit on that dirt and dust and it fell off. Now they got to tape it over. Just a 30-second example. When I was on the West Coast this week, their screens, as I said, looked like buckshot, looked like the universe. And the young girl was cleaning screens, didn't speak any English. I unplugged her fans and took them away from her. She was livid. I don't know what she was saying to me, but it wasn't nice. But I told her, no worries, no fans, not coat them till tomorrow. And so we coated that 30 screens the next day. And at lunch, the owner, the GM, the ops guy, they all come in. And I showed them the difference just by holding. It wasn't even exposed. I said, these are the screens you guys coat with fans. Here's the screens we coat without fans. And they weren't perfect, but 99.9% of the dirt and dust that caused pinholes was gone. So at that time, I had the owner and management's approval, no fans.
Amen.
It was that easy.
So just buy more screen, people. If you don't have enough screen, you have to use fans. Just buy more screens. It's going to be easier for you on press.
I'll share real quick that if you're, let's use 50 as an example. If your number of screens needed per day is 50. That means they need to reclaim 50 a day.
You know,
You need to be able to coat 50 every day and shoot 50. Production might have double that. So a shop that's running 50 screens a day, in the perfect world, would have 250 screens.
Yeah.
Production
Makes
has
sense.
100 because you don't always get the goods or you misprint too many or something.
Yep.
But everything that they reclaim today, I'm going to coat tomorrow. Everything you coat today, I'll shoot tomorrow. So it's kind of like, this is stupid, but it's like the circle of life with the Lion King and Simba. Circle of life. Screens have a circle of life. And if you fill that void in each spot, your days will be much easier flowing. And on top of that, what I share is if the guy that reclaims screens doesn't come in today, he called in the last minute because, his dog ate his keys. No panic, because the screen maker has got 50 she coated yesterday, and the 50 she coated yesterday plus 50 they reclaimed yesterday. So now you have 2 days to prepare to double up on the reclaim to replenish the fill. And if you do that, you'll never be in panic mode, because there's so many people that reclaim, dry, coat, and shoot the screens and put them back on the press the same day, which is crazy, but it happens more than what you think.
Very cool. Interesting.
And you need more than that, because then you have different types of mesh, different types of, so like 250s bare minimum if you want to be efficient in your darkroom. All right, enough about screens and fans and things like that. Let's talk about, I say this often, and we talked about it earlier, but like lack of proper tension. What does that indicate when you're on press? What does that result to?
Well, things don't stay in registration very well. As an example, the task that we used to do when I was in production a couple of months ago, that we had the art room run us a set of separations, and it's like a target, different style rings, perfect rings, and I'd shoot 6 screens and put them on each press, and I knew which ones were under attention, but I needed the press guys to come to me and say, hey, this one doesn't line up. Then I asked them why. But if you're going to run a 6 color all at 24 newtons in a circle, and you drop in an 18 newton or 16 newton screen in on it, it's never going to line up. I don't care what you do, because I'm going to give this credit to Richard Grease, my buddy in Detroit. But if you've got, I don't know, can you see this? Yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
If you've got a weak tension, this is what the squeegee does to the mesh. It rolls it. But if the screen tension's tight, the squeegee does not roll the mesh, and they'll stay in registration and print better. Proper tension gives you better ink flow. It's going to hold the emulsion better, consistent, the exposure. You see a lot of people with that dark, thick emulsion down the center, but it's thin on the other side.
Yep.
That's because when they press on it with the manual coater, it's never going to be uniform across, and they're going to get a thick spot. So technically, we dial the exposure into the EOM. And if it's thicker in the center, in a sense, the center has a different exposure than the outer edges, which is ridiculous, but that's the reality of that.
I'm so big on tension because we spend a lot of money on the LTS, and I feel like if we don't take proper time to measure our tension, then the LTS is worthless, in the sense that I want to be up and running on press because of the LTS, right? So, but if my tension is off on my screens, then I can't call Keith and be like, hey, your machine is not working, I'm not lining up on press. He's going to tell me, all right, what's your tension on your screens? I'll be, one's 18, the other one's 23. So don't call me, go fix your screens, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
but
I'm big on tension.
It's surprising, all these people that buy screens from a local distributor, which we're all about supporting, they never check the tension when they get to their shop. Now, those screens are stretched in advance. They're boxed up. They're sitting on the shelf. Shipped same day. What's the tension? Do you have no QC in place to check the tension before you coat a screen? Now, the company on the West Coast, they check the tension every time. Even though they're static frames, they check the tension every time, and they write it right on the side of the frame where the mesh count is. So she pulls a 230, she knows it's a 24. All of their screens were between 18 and 24. And I seen a few at 14 and 16. And I was curious, well, why don't you pull those out? She said, no, we save them for an occasional one color. But I can look from 12 feet and know which 230 has low tension because they take the time to check it every time. By getting those new screens in, every shop should benchmark what is acceptable and work with their screen stretcher and letting them know, hey, I don't know if you got to stretch these special for me, but I want this at the manufacturer's recommended max tension levels when it hits my dock. Not when you stretched it 6 weeks ago, when it hits my dock. And that helps really get the printer and the dealer and or screen stretcher on the same page that, hey, this shop cares about quality.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
That's the precedent.
So the other big one. Oh, go ahead.
Small tip: when you write on your screens your tension, you're probably going to use a Sharpie, right? So any shop owner is like, I don't want to write with a Sharpie because how am I going to erase it? I don't want to use something that's really bad or nasty. You can just use 100% alcohol, like the alcohol wipes, and it wipes right off your screens. So that's a small tip just to shop owners. Yeah.
Well done.
Shawn's tip of the day. I wouldn't know because I've never written on a screen before. I've transported a couple in my car, but that's about it. Never stretched one. I'm going to actually do a video on the SAATI Eco Frames, which we love. We do so well with them. I don't have a single shop that starts with me anymore that goes with static.
Do you have the large Eco Frames?
Yeah. Those are all Nortec. There's an HD frame, a mid-range, and a low-range, but each mesh panel is ordered specific to which frames you have.
Yeah, and we do 20 by 24, 22 by 27, 23 by 31, and 25 by 36.
Oh, you do 25 by 36?
No,
by request. There's very few guys that are doing it, but if you want them, yes, I'll bring in the frames for you, then I'll stock all the panels.
I want that. So we're going to have to talk after this.
I'm adding to the notes. So, Shawn.
This is a good call. That's expensive.
Jeez, I gotta bring Keith around more often. This is the first podcast. We're making some money here.
Why didn't you tell me this before? I've always complained about my... I didn't know.
I've been trying to get you into Eco Frames forever. Always.
I know, but I always say, well, they're too small. They're too small. I don't want 23 by 31s. I want 25 by 36.
You seen what we did at Avid? We had 64 rolling in 3 days, put on 4 different presses. Water-based plastisol discharge.
Yep.
Oil, specialty stampinator. And we didn't lose one. Even some of them were hydro mesh at 230 and 305.
Yep.
And listen to this. We're actually launching a buyback program, Shawn. So all the meshes that you've actually torn or the tension's too low, instead of paying to get them restretched, you send them to me and I give you a nice credit towards a brand new Eco Frame.
Wow. I'm going to send you a few pallets.
I'm a nice guy. Trying to give back, So cool. Moving on. I think this is and this became very apparent to me when we did our class. I was talking to Keith. I'm like, Keith, what emulsion should we give people? He's like, how many people are coming? I'm like, 120. He's like, well, that's going to be very difficult to give them one emulsion. And he came out this really cool spreadsheet that asked him a whole bunch of questions. And we've decided that we're going to build out a program on our website, the Emulsion Wizard kind of thing. Maybe I should name it after Keith. I'm going to turn you into cartoon. Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to turn you into a cartoon character. And it's going to be Ask Keith the Emulsion Wizard. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm serious. I'm dead serious. It's happening. So emulsion choices. Like I said, I've seen guys running graphics emulsions when they shouldn't. Guys that are trying to use, PHUMT for water-based or, just crazy or using a MT with the fluorescent. So what criteria would you say someone needs to run through besides just going on our website in the future and having it do all the thinking for you? But what kind of questions do you need to ask yourselves to help determine what the best emulsion is for you?
I come up with this list and this criteria because I get dealers call me from all over the country and they say, hey, this customer uses XYZ from Milano or PDQ from Kiwo or this Murakami. What's your equivalent? I'm like, I don't play that game. Not all emulsions fit in all shops. It is relative to, I asked him, number one, what do you guys screen print? What type of inks do you use? What exactly, or which exposure unit exactly do you use? So what I'm after is plastisol water-based discharge. Are we running enamel, epoxy, UV? So that gets me, my head is turning as to what emulsions fit that shop. Next is their exposure unit. So if they tell me they're running everything under the sun, they run plastisol water-based discharge, they run some UV once in a while, and they screen print on oil filter cans. So they need epoxy. So we're running 5 different inks. So that tells me a water-resistant emulsion is not going to work. A solvent-resistant emulsion is not going to work. It's got to be some sort of hybrid dual cure.
Yep.
Now that I know what emulsion they use, then they come back and tell me, we have a fluorescent exposure unit. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're handicapped. Because certain emulsions require a certain amount of spectrum of light. As an example, an emulsion to fit that profile that I just talked about would need to be a metal halide or LED.
Yep.
So the pure photopolymer emulsions, and for those that don't know those are the ones you do not mix. It's very difficult to get the success rate out of that emulsion and get everything out of it what we design it to with a fluorescent tube or quartz or a halogen bulb, because their spectrum of light goes here and caps here. Those emulsions might require a spectrum of light up here. So the metal halide and LED are somewhere between 390 and 405. We spec the lasers out to 405.
Yep.
We sell a couple different freestanding LED lights. They're all 405. Most of the metal halides are like 390. And we've worked with most equipment manufacturers to, ensure what they're producing, because they make equipment. They don't make emulsion.
Yeah.
So to me, it's very important to find out what inks they're running and what exposure unit they have. And with Zack's class that we just did, I had to stop 3 or 4 of them with taking the PHUMT or the PHUHR home, because I said, listen, you're going to expose this and you're going to go run it on the press, but it's not going to reclaim properly. So the consequence for them is the water basin discharge is going to break down on press. And then when they get it to reclaim, the emulsion is going to kind of come out funky, gummy, chunky, stringy, etc. And that's not normal. It is very surprising to find out how many small to mid-sized accounts think that emulsion coming out gummy and chunky and stringy is normal. And it's not. If you have the proper emulsion with the proper light source and the proper exposure, it will melt out. And I have reclaimed the emulsion with a garden hose before to prove it to people.
Yeah.
So once you miss the initial exposure, trying to do something like that, like with using a fluorescent or a halogen, there is no amount of post-exposure that's going to make up from the initial needing to be here. There's no amount of post-exposure that's going to make that up. So I broke a few people's hearts at Zack's class and tell them, I can't rightfully send you home with this product that you want because it's not going to work like we know it should. So because you have this unit, we want you to use this emulsion with diazo in it. Because yes, it's 8 times longer exposure. Yes, it's got diazo and you got to mix it and let it set, but it will run on the press just fine and it will reclaim just fine.
And
Excellent.
do you think people should look at what exposure unit they're going to buy depending on what they want to print? Or do you think any exposure unit is going to work depending on the different type of emulsion you want to buy, right?
Our market has really moved to LED in the last 5 years. But I can tell you there are thousands and thousands of fluorescent tube exposure units out there, and some quartz.
Yep.
I don't see many halogen, but these guys on YouTube and some of the forums that build their own unit with halogen, my hat's off to them. They did build an exposure unit of their own from Home Depot, and they've got $89 in it. Yep. But it's still limited to a diazo emulsion. So our market has gone towards LED, and I believe all these fluorescent tube units, exposure, halogen, they'll fall out in the next 5 years because you can't get replacement parts. Some of them you can't even get bulbs for. Zack and I talked about a conversion kit for the one lady that was there, and she wanted the PHUHR emulsion really bad.
Hey, she got it.
Did she take it?
She bought the Fastex LED conversion unit, and she got the PHUHR.
Nice.
Shawn, I'm going to expect my commission check by the end of the month.
It's like a $600 light bulb upgrade. I made like $12. Come on, I'll buy a Big Mac.
But the key was, if you got a conversion kit to bring the spectrum of light up in those old units, beautiful. Pull the trigger.
Amazing.
Cool.
Nice.
So emulsion thickness, that's the next topic. We talked about how to read it. Let's talk about what happens if you don't have that dialed in properly. What kind of challenges can you face?
And again, we sort of, even if you've got the right spectrum of light, let's pick one out. Let's say you do have the PHUHR and you have an LED explosion, but you expose it to a solid 5. It's not going to reclaim properly. It's going to, even by having the right emulsion and right exposure, it's going to come out a little funky. So determining, and most of these newer emulsions are high solids, anywhere from 43 to 50% solid.
Yep.
With a round edge coater, you can get away with most of that with 1-in-1 with a round edge. And most people are. But figuring that out is just part of the equation. Dialing in that exposure so that it goes to the press and doesn't break down. It also is going to reclaim fine, and it's going to turn and cycle more efficiently. So plastisol, we touched base earlier, 18 to 20%. Water-based, maybe 10 to 14, depending what you're doing. Smaller shops are not going to have somebody come in and measure emulsion thickness. They're just going to go 1-on-1 around as slow as they can with control so their hands don't shimmy and shake.
Yep.
And they're going to dial it into there. And for those that don't have a 21-step scale, the tech calls that I get, I tell them to increase the exposure 20%, shoot another screen, call me. They call me. It's like, it's better. Add another 20%. In many, many cases, I've doubled their exposures to get it to be proper, and they're shocked that the image still rinses out fine.
And then after 3 times they don't got it, Keith gets fed up and he's like, listen, just send me your address and your UPS account and I'm going to send you this bloody 21-step calculator.
I do it, not very often, but I do mail out a couple of them from my home with Zack's home address as a return. But exposure is not that difficult. There's a couple of old school ways. We used to do a step wedge where you block it off, and you figure it out when you want, then you dial it and block it off again. But you can just keep increasing the exposure until you start to have difficulty and then back off. That's the sweet spot.
Yep.
So for these athletic printers, it's not rocket science. But so many of them are grossly underexposing because Timmy told them to. Yeah, it's faster. They never account for the 5 to 8 minutes in reclaim for one screen, which is ridiculous.
And it goes back to EOM, right? So I want to go faster, so I'm not going to have as big of an EOM on my mash, so I'm going to go and print my white super quickly. I'm going to expose it quickly, and I'm probably going to hit that screen. It's not going to be underexposed because it's a thin coat on my mesh. But then you're going to go on press, especially with plastisol, and then you're going to try to print a white. Man, hitting my first white. This is a 157. It's not white at all. I'm going to have to hit 4 whites because my EOM is maybe 10, 12% compared to what it should be at 17 or 18, right?
People don't understand. They're always calling around looking for a better white ink. You don't need a better white ink. You need to be a better screen maker.
Yep.
So if you get the right tension and the right EOM and a nice flood and shear the ink, the opacity will be unreal.
Yeah, totally.
And so flood's important too.
Yeah, totally. Another big one, stream room conditions. I think this is always massively overlooked. One thing I want to pick your brain on, you talked about pinholes and fans and blowing it out and leaving, coating screens, leaving them overnight to dry. We've always been very successful with the Vastex dry vault units. Every auto shop, I pretty much end up putting one in just because it eliminates a lot of those variables. They coat the screen. First of all, you rinse the screen off and you throw it in there. 20 minutes later, it's ready to be coated. But it's a dark enclosed environment that's not going to let any
dust or debris
get on it. So we found that works very well when customers are struggling with that kind of stuff. What's your take on those?
If an account can afford it, a tower dryer or one of these, it's ideal. I recommend, got some cheap drawings because I'm not an architect, but I suggest people build a hot box all the time. You can go to Lowe's, spend $300 and come back and build your own cabinet, slide screens in, cut a hole at the bottom and a fake floor, and they blow heat in the bottom with a little ceramic bathroom heater. And I drill holes in the floor and the heat just rises. And if I need to, I'll put an exhaust fan in the top to pull the heat through. And they can build all that for about, it's about 300, 350 US, so maybe 500 Canadian. They can build one and do it today for those DIY guys.
Yeah.
But for screen room conditions, and it still stays true today. 40% less humidity, 76 degrees target, no fans. And I have a little OCD problem sometimes, and I'm very passionate about this. So at the last 2
Shawn
hours,
too. Wow.
Yeah.
You guys
the
must be
last 2
related.
hours, when I was in production, the last 2 hours of the week, I took everything up off the floor and I would damp mop my screen room. Because again, it was drilled into my head at an early age. What you cannot see in the screen room is your enemy. Dirt and dust is the enemy. The laser you've got, Shawn, the number one enemy is dirt and dust. And it's point said.
Amen.
Well done. Well done.
I like these talks.
This is a good one. That's why I'm like, I don't want to just, this is one, I didn't want to just do it off the top. I wanted to have some form of structure so we can cover the important things that I think our users want to listen to. Next up is exposure.
We've touched base on this many times.
Yep.
Even if you reclaim the screen properly and don't use a fan and got the proper thickness, if you're not concerned about your exposure per mesh count, then probably not the right person for the job. Because you can do everything right and do this wrong and completely void out everything you did to make it right.
Mm-hmm.
The tension, the EOM, and the exposure are critical. And as we shared, get a 21-step guide or keep increasing it until you lose a detail and back off. Find the sweet spot. Mm-hmm. It really is more simple than people give it credit for.
Yeah.
They overcomplicate it, or I don't have time. They wanted to shoot it at 14 seconds when the proper exposure was, 22. Really? Right? We're going to fight over 8 seconds? He's like, oh, that's almost, that's 50% more. Yeah, exactly. But everything is going to be better. You're going to have less pinholes. It's going to develop fine. They're going to get the proper ink deposit. It's not going to scum. So what I didn't mention, so on the squeegee side, which is what we call the well, if that emulsion's underexposed, that underexposed emulsion will run down into the image area. When it dries, it looks like like scum, like a clear film in the image. Chemical will not take that out. Only water takes that out. And when I first started, we put newspaper on the inside of the screen to pull that film out. And Al Petsy taught me, he's like, hey, Keith, all you guys that bring in the Sunday newspapers on Monday morning to take that scum out all week long, if you just increase the exposure, that'll go away. I'm like, it's not that easy. Well, it turned out that it was that easy. Wow. But, the artwork's got to be there, get the right exposure.
Yep.
And the exposure is to go all the way through the emulsion and cure. Exposure is about curing the emulsion. You want to go all the way through to where both sides are thoroughly cured, and the better it's cured, the harder the emulsion is, and it won't delaminate or break down on press. So it's critical.
And like for us when I was starting, I liked just testing out emulsion. I was like, all right, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. And oftentimes I tried emulsion and they weren't working. And I didn't understand that if I just went on the website and read what the wavelength of the exposure needed to be, I would just never bought that emulsion, never tested out, because the machine I had was never going to hit that wavelength. Right? So that's a test too. If your emulsion is not working, you ramped it up, you still ramped it up and it's still not working. Well, just go read what the wavelength needs to be. Call your suppliers like, hey, my exposure unit that I bought from you, what's the wavelength? Am I hitting that exposure? Oh, no, I'm not. Okay, maybe I need a diazo emulsion and I'm going to hit it up. Different test it out, and now it's going to work. So like you said, it's a lot easier than you think if you just read up on it and then you actually see, okay, I don't have this. And people, I think, are scared of adding more time to their exposure unit because oftentimes they're using film, and their film machine is probably missing a bit of ink, or maybe their heads are clogged up, or they're not working properly. I don't want to spend another $200 on more ink, things like that. Invest in it, right? It's massive, because if you don't have good film or whatever machine you're using, it's not gonna help in the darkroom either. So yeah.
This brings me to an interesting topic, actually. So you're talking film. I go into some old school shops and they're running vellum.
What's that?
You like vellum, Keith? Shawn,
Uh,
I had never even seen vellum maybe until 3 years ago, and I saw like there's a couple of other contract shops. I'm like, what the hell is that you're using? It looks like parchment paper, kind of like what
guys
cookie
just
tray.
you just brought up nightmares and shit that I used to have back in my
Let me look it
production
up.
days.
What's vellum?
Vellum
Vellum.
is paper. It's supposed to be a translucent laser. There's laser and vellum. So, Shawn, essentially, vellum is like paper. People used to print artwork off a Xerox copier, and the paper was too thick. So Casey's was very, very famous back in the day. They would print on this paper, translucent paper. It was disposable, and they would make their screens with that.
Yeah.
So in turn,
how's that blocking light?
It sucked.
Does it?
It was horrible. But for a screen maker, we would get some salespeople to bring in supplied art. I'm okay with supplied art. Send me the file. Send us. No. We're printing it out for you. Okay, cool. They would come in with this pile of paper to the screen room and said, this is for job 1, this is job 2, and then all in vellum. And I would say, okay, because of my experience with it, which wasn't good, because vellum technically is about 20-30% longer than clear film, because it's trying to expose and go through the paper
as well.
However, the ink jets that they're printing on the paper, the density level wasn't very good.
It's not UV dye blocking ink.
It's a perfect density level of like 4.0. So the best we could hope to achieve was like 2.
So how are you exposing
vellum
screen
was
with
probably
that?
like 0.06. I mean, it was horrible. So then people was like, it's not dark enough. So let's lay 2 of them together, married up and tape it. Oh yeah. The horrifying nightmare.
No detail, basically. I mean, that's the biggest issue, right? No detail.
Yeah.
But I would take those stacks of artwork that they brought me and I would carry them into the art room and say, here you go. Make me some clear acetates. They're like, oh, God.
You're a nice guy, Keith. I would set on fire. If a client brought those to me, I'd literally put them onto a garbage bin. I'd light a match and I'd say, when you're serious, then we'll print for you.
Yeah. My art room hated when I did that. But the quality is horrible. If you're doing one color stuff, I did learn some tricks over the years with vellum. I could tape it down to a big manila envelope and speed the dryer belt up in production. And I would run it through the dryer, and it would darken the tone and give me 3 times the density.
Oh.
And it's great for one colors, but you start shrinking paper on multicolor job, nothing lines up. Now,
so Shawn, I think we should make a little, those like little YouTube shorts that we talked about doing now. If we could make one specifically around vellum, because I'd like to email this to 2 or 3 customers that I told them they're nuts for using vellum and they didn't believe me. So coming from the Emulsion Wizard himself and his take on vellum, I think I might get some film.
Was.
Hey, no,
yeah,
Zack,
neither did I. Yeah.
The wizard of vellum is whoever was it invented toner aid. It was a spray can. They would lay all the vellums out and they would go and spray them with this toner aid, and it did. It would stick and it'd make the ink darker. I don't know what the chemistry is in line with.
Was behind it.
It appeared darker, and it did help. So the guy selling the $6-7 can, and they would go through 5 cans a day. That's the genius.
That's a genie.
I learned to use clear Krylon paint spray in 99-cent can at the it's at the dollar store now. We didn't have them back in the day.
Awesome. And last but not least, we've covered this one pretty much. Choosing the right light source for your emulsion. We kind of covered that already.
Yeah, we did.
And lighting in darkroom, I think that's important too. We didn't talk about it, but like people are often super scared about lighting. Yeah, lighting in the darkroom.
I have been in places where people coat screens in their living room and they stack them up in the closet. Then they shoot them, rinse them, and they print in the garage. But we carry these safe light sleeves, and everybody does. They'll go over fluorescent tubes or screw and bulbs to give you the proper lighting to keep your emulsion safe. And this is all about coating screens ahead of time and having them set there. But I have seen people use Rubylith, Amberlith, screw and bug lights.
Yep.
The slower the emulsion is exposing, like diazos, you could use a bug light. Heck, I've seen people do them out in regular white lighting.
Yeah.
But if you're storing a lot of screens, it is proper and in a proper screen room to have the proper lighting. And your screen room doesn't need to be painted black. I did 2 of them that way back in the day, and I had no idea that the colors of the wall meant nothing. That's the proper lighting. And if we get together, I got these cool glasses we could pass around to see if you do have
cool.
the proper lighting.
So, Keith, I want to ask you a question because this is one of the, I don't know what you call it, like myths that I still don't have an exact answer to. Okay. When it comes to a dry vault, I was told that theoretically, if you are using a dry vault and you do not have a window nearby that's letting in UV light, you don't need a darkroom. And the reason why, they said, if you stand underneath an LED fixture or light source for 4 hours, are you going to get a tan? And I said, well, no, I'm not going to get a tan. So then they said, so then your emulsion will not be affected. Is this accurate? Because I've told some people and they say yes. And I've told some of the guys at M&R and they looked at me like I was smoking a little something I shouldn't right before coming to see them. So I don't know what the answer is because it's so polar opposite, but there's like 2 squads that are kind of fighting over this answer. So,
But doesn't it depend on the emulsion you have?
Yeah, it absolutely does, Shawn.
Yeah.
And here it is. Pure photopolymer emulsions are more sensitive than our skin. 100 times more sensitive because they are light sensitive. We technically in our skin are not light sensitive. No. Yeah, sun and UV rays will burn us over time, but with emulsion, we like to do a quarter test. For somebody that really doesn't know and they want to know, then take a screen that's been coated and dried, set it out in that light that's supposed to be, and put some quarters or a square or something on there, and let it sit there for an hour. After it's set there an hour, remove that and go hit everything with water. If it all stays in the screen and is locked up like a screen you were going to print, but the area you covered with the quarters rinses out, then you got a lighting problem. And that the box you have for the drying, what'd you call it? The dry box, dry vault.
The dry vault.
Dry vault.
Those are used to dry the emulsion or dry the wet screens coming from the reclaim. But the heat in those also affect emulsion, age, time, and temperature. So does everybody run with a screen room? Anybody that cares and is running a volume, they have a designated area. But the proper lighting is crucial. And for those that don't think they need proper lighting, I like to lay a screen on the counter or on the floor, put some things on it to cover it, and walk away. Leave it set for 3 or 4 hours. If you want a good example, take one that you've got coated and put a couple quarters on it and just take it right outside in the sun and let it set for 30 minutes and take it in and rinse it out. And you'll understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, you should have knowledge of and be concerned about the lighting in your screen room, because if it's wrong, it could shut you down. And you've got 60 screens coated, it's $100 in a gallon of emulsion, the 2 hours it took you to coat everything. And if it's wrong and they all harden up on you, now you got to reclaim them.
Yep.
You got to recoat them. You got 2 days of downtime. So it does matter, the lighting.
And it does matter with high definition too. If you want to hit super high definition, your screen's laying there for 3-4 days and it's just taking a bit of light, right? And you want to hit those 65 or 55 LPIs on that 230, you're going to miss some halftones because it's been burning already, right? You're not going to be able to expose those. So yeah. All right. I'm intrigued. You've been in so many shops. We're probably going to end with this because I think this is interesting. What are some of the craziest things you've seen in shops throughout your small career, because you're so young, that you
spring chicken
that you've seen? What is the craziest thing, craziest story or thing you've seen
or couple,
in the shop?
if you got a couple?
Yeah.
Well, my early days working out of Cincinnati cleaning screens, I would do demos anywhere. I didn't care, man. I was on a rampage and tear selling reclaim chemistry. I have cleaned and reclaimed screens in a bathtub where they bathed the children the night before. True story. 100%.
I have seen that also. I won't call out my customer. I rip on him all the time for it, but yes.
Because they say, what does it matter? It's drain safe. I'm going to rinse it out when I'm done.
I got one worse for you. He rinses the screen in the bathtub, and then the drain coming out of our washout booth goes into the toilet. That he also uses occasionally.
But yeah, we're guys. I mean, we're not that picky. So, coating screens. I've seen, a manual coating trough, depending on the size, is $30 to $50, maybe 60
maximum.
Canadian.
Yeah.
I have seen people coat screens, well, 3 different ways. I've seen people pour the emulsion on the edge of the screen, and they drag the emulsion across the mesh
God.
with a squeegee, or I've seen them use a flood bar. And they'll flip it over with another pour, and they'll drag it across, and then they get a scrape card, and they scrape out the excess.
Wait.
And put it back in the bucket.
When you say a flood bar, this means this was an automatic shop.
Oh my God.
Yes, 100%. So that's crazy. Now, and they worked. There was no EOM, but they didn't care about thickness of emulsion. All they cared about was how many screens can I get out of this $80 gallon of emulsion, which they were getting over 100 screens out of this gallon of emulsion. And he was very proud of that. So I asked him if he was equally proud of the pinholes, because the emulsion didn't even cover the knuckles of the mesh.
And the amount of tape he had to spend to print.
I asked him, are you equally as proud of all the pinholes you got to tape off? And also, and if you are you proud of on press, the manual press, they had to print, flash, print to get a decent coverage. Now, why did they have to do that? Because they had no stencil. The flood and print, flash, flood and print should be it.
Yeah.
But the guy had no stencil thickness, and they thought it was normal to double, triple, quadruple hit a white screen. I'd see the people doing this. I'm like, dude, you hit that like 6 times. He's like, yeah, it's normal.
I'm working out. Didn't work out this morning.
Yeah. So the other thing that was kind of cool, coating, but I was in a large graphics shop. They were coating a screen that was 72 inches wide, 120 inches long.
Wow.
They didn't have an automatic coater.
No.
Anybody that does this in today's market now has an automatic. But they would pour a half a gallon of emulsion out, and there'd be a guy on each side of the screen, and the screen was suspended on sawhorses.
Oh my God.
And they were dual cure emulsion, but they would pour out about a quarter or half a gallon, and there were a guy on each side of the screen. He'd press down with a coating trough, and they would walk the whole length of the screen. Then they'd scrape up the emulsion, put it back, go down, pour another bead, because it was 2 and 2. They did this twice. They'd flip the screen over, they'd pour the emulsion in it, press down on the coating machine, or the coating trough. God. And the coating trough itself, I believe, was 64 inches wide.
Wow.
It was not, dude, the company's in Cincinnati, in northern Kentucky, and they've been screen printing for 30 years. Extremely successful. But as barbaric as that was, and old school, these guys made it work.
Can't believe it.
There's all kinds of other stories. I wish I'd have wrote a book or taken better notes of all the crazy stuff I've seen over the years.
Maybe that'll be part of your retirement journey when you're 80 years old. Yeah.
My wife just walked in. She said I'm not allowed to retire.
Oh, no? Oh, man. You're in trouble. I don't know if I'll want to retire either. I haven't always dreams about retiring, but I love what I do. And
I am.
It's too fun.
Build a food truck.
You know what you're going to build? Dry vaults for people for $350 in material, and you're going to sell them for $550.
I'm going to build a food truck with Wagyu and tomahawks and attend your events.
Oh, let's do that, buddy. Shawn missed that event. He missed the golden tomahawks, the Wagyu.
Hey,
the girls with the sparkler guns. It was like 4th of July.
Keith is like, busy. I'm looking at Keith at one point. He's like, "What is going on here? It's just insane."
That mixer Friday night was off the hook. It's one of the best parties I've ever been to.
Thanks, buddy. We got
have to
another
be there
one
next year.
I'm working on another one for DTF now with Mamaki. Ooh. That's going to be a fun one at their head office. So maybe sometime in April. So, Shawn, you can make it on time this time.
Exactly.
Oh, and I highly, highly suggest the smoked old fashions.
Yes. Yeah, those are great.
Great presentation.
With the freshly hand-rolled Cuban cigars. You missed out on that too, Shawn.
My son is an avid cigar guy, and he liked the Nicaraguan better than the Cuban. Just saying.
Oh yeah. It's very. Everyone's got their own personal preferences when it comes to cigars, or
I've never smoked cigars at all in my life.
Bourbons. No?
Oh, Shawn.
No, I
We
don't
all
drink.
walked outside, thought we'd smoked this half a cigar, and it like to killed me. I come home, I was hacking 3 days later.
My
I'm
brother-in-laws are big cigar guys, so
yeah.
that's right. I picked up the habit.
Man, that's fine. I don't know why. I'm just kind of boring on that side. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I love making screens, man.
No.
Sean's like, what? Go to a party? Forget that. I'm gonna coat screens and not hit a perfect 6. That's
I
what
thought kind of sounded like a kiss ass there for a minute. I mean, like, come on, Shawn.
No, he's dead serious. He's not joking.
No.
Yeah, you got to have a reason to go to the mixer. If it's not for the girls with all the hors d'oeuvres walking around, or the tomahawk, the wagyu, and the sparkles.
I like Wagyu and Tomahawk.
You know, there was one point where they came out with like these guns and they were spraying and there was like sparks flying up.
What?
And I'm like,
Everywhere.
yeah, and I'm looking up at the ceiling and I'm like, oh man, are my
We're gonna
sprinklers
burn
going to
down.
go off? Like
Oh.
literally, they were shooting the sprinklers, shooting the sparks into the sprinklers. I'm like, this is going to be really bad. Everyone's going to have to evacuate. But
It looked
yeah,
like a sci-fi movie. These girls were dressed in neon, head to toe, big boots looking like Gene Simmons, and these neon glasses and arms. And I was waiting for the lights. They turned the
Selling this
lights
event
off
so
and-
good. I want to be
Hey,
there next year. Wow.
listen, I told everybody, I like to throw a party. RB likes to throw a party. It's our way to show appreciation to our customers who spend time and time again with, give us their hard-earned money and work and grow with us. So it's a nice way to give back, bring the community together, have specialists come out and really teach people. And we're hoping to do 3 or 4 of these things a year, easy. So next one's in April.
Well,
for
I can
DTF.
tell you that if it's anything related, SAATI truly appreciated the invitation we got and the friends and family and customers we made together. And I'll be there anytime I can. And we at SAATI really appreciate RB and Shawn and you and the LTS, everything you guys are doing to the north. And we really look forward to what the next couple of years is going to bring. For sure.
Same.
Well, you'll see them because you're not allowed to retire. So
Exactly.
Well, if it's summer months, my wife says that she's going to have to come with me to monitor all these cute girls you got walking around with hors d'oeuvres.
you should invite her to the Montreal one. Has she been to Montreal before?
No, she's a Toronto girl.
Okay,
likes Toronto.
so bring her out
He's
to
gonna love
Montreal.
Montreal. Yeah.
Yeah. We're thinking of doing one at Trademark. He's got the digital squeegee in Canada, and I think 3 or 4 other ones. So that's gonna be a really cool event. We're gonna start planning
Nice.
that out shortly. So, anyways, Keith, thanks,
Thank you.
buddy. Always a wealth of knowledge. I don't think I've ever had a conversation where I haven't learned from you, and I appreciate you being my emulsion mentor. And I'm truly confident that every single listener who is dialed in on this podcast brought something home with them that's going to improve their lives. So a thank you
100%.
from them to you as well, buddy.
And if anything, I can help with them on an individual basis, like we did yesterday with Brian. Just give them my number. Tell them to reach out and contact me. I'll talk to them direct, or we'll do a group call or whatever it takes. We'll land them. We'll hook them and reel them like we did Shawn.
Exactly.
Shout out Brian from Star Silk Screening. I told him about this podcast. He's like, I'm going to tune in, and he'll have a nice big smile on his face after listening to that. So, well, thanks
There we
again,
go.
buddy. Wish you all the best, and looking forward to our next projects.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
Talk soon.
Appreciate the invitation.
Bye bye.
See ya.